Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Eat, Meat, and Question Everything. Today, I have Kalli Youngstrom on. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
I am so excited to chat. So, if you guys haven't listened already, she has a podcast called Keep Yourself Well, and she interviewed me. It's probably been like a year or so, right?
I think that you were 8 months in, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken, to carnivore, which is why I'm like, we need to do another episode now that is it 2 years in?
Yeah, I just hit 2 years. Yeah, I remember when you reached out, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because I was still, like, new to all this, and I'm like, "She has such a big following." Like, I was just, like, so honored that you reached out to me, it was really cool.
Oh,
And
thank
then
you.
I've been obsessed with you ever since, and I
Oh,
love watching
likewise.
your stuff. Especially I'm, like, so drawn to what you're doing right now because in my past life before kids, I traveled everywhere, and I lived on the island St. Thomas in the Caribbean for a couple years. So the fact that you just recently moved to Nicaragua, right? Is
Yes.
like I'm, like, living vicariously through you.
Yeah, right now for 3 months I'm in Barbados, so that would be probably more similar culturally to St. Thomas, I would imagine.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to ask too. Well, I have so many questions about it all, but why are you in Barbados?
So I end of December, kind of last minute, got an opportunity to do my practicum for my public health master's in Barbados. So I was originally just going to do a virtual practicum, with an organization in my original city, but I was going to do it in Nicaragua. And then this opportunity came up specifically to study type 2 diabetes, which is like my bread and butter and a big component of what I do in my keto coaching that I jumped on it. So yeah, quick detour to Barbados for me, for the next 90 days.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Did you ever watch Friends? Is
Yes.
this where they went when Monica, like for Ross's talk when Monica had the big hair?
Okay, I remember the big hair and I don't remember where they are, so I'm gonna have to look it up. But it's probably either Barbados or Bahamas, which is hilarious because everybody in their mind gets them confused, myself included,
Yeah.
before I looked into Barbados.
Yeah, I know it was a B, but I'm almost positive it's Barbados. That's so funny.
Okay, I
Um,
need to look.
okay, actually real quick because I didn't Google, where is it on the map?
So a Caribbean island, and so I don't know where
Okay.
St. Thomas is. I'm gonna have to look. I wonder how adjacent. It's considered North America.
Okay. So, I don't know if you know where Puerto Rico is, but, St. Thomas was, like, to the east of
It's
Puerto
up
Rico a
there.
little bit. So you might be, like,
Okay,
down a little bit more, probably.
I'll have to look. Yes, small island.
Okay, so fun. Are you loving it so far?
Yeah, we haven't had a ton of time to explore. And because we're living here, we're not kind of like in the action. We're essentially in like the suburbs of Barbados, but we recently got a car, so we'll be able to explore a little bit more. Um, but we've been to a few beaches, and I mean, it's just beautiful. And you can feel the island life, like everything goes a little slow, everyone's super welcoming. So, yeah, so far, so good. We've been here a week and a couple of days. So, just getting acclimated. And we finally got a car, which I've not yet driven because they drive on the side of the road here. So, I'm working up the courage to prepare myself for that.
Okay, I just had to look it up. So, yes, you are way more, like, southeast, in the Caribbean, like, down there. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, it's probably, like, so similar. Yeah, I remember the driving was, like, crazy, and it was so at least in St. Thomas, so normal to hitchhike. Like, I used to hitchhike all the time. Like like,
Oh,
"What?
I,
Oh my gosh, Courtney."
I love it. I have not seen anyone hitchhiking here, but in Nicaragua, it's super common to hitchhike. Very common. And because a lot of the locals don't have cars and, you know a lot of people as you're walking around, but I've yet to see any hitchhikers here. And
Oh,
I've
that's
yet
so
to
funny.
hitchhike. I've also yet to hitchhike.
Okay, okay. What's it like down there as far as, like, just in, like, the health and wellness space? Like, do you look around, is everyone healthy, or is it like America where
Mm.
everyone is clearly, like, overweight and sick?
So okay, whenever I talk about my personal experience living in Nicaragua, a month into my time there, which was meant to originally be 3 months, I hadn't planned originally to relocate. I made a video because my Aura ring had shown me some really interesting data where all of a sudden within 4 weeks, my resting heart rate had dropped. It's already low, like it's already around 50, and it dropped like 38 consistently. My recovery score skyrocketed, my stress levels were down, and my lifestyle had not changed all that much. I was still working, I was still doing my master's degree, running my business, not my nutrition hadn't really changed aside from, kind of maybe the quality of the food sources, but I was still keto. So I was really surprised about that. But I try to give a disclaimer that I think it's a very high privilege to go to Nicaragua and become healthier, because I would not say that that's the norm for the majority of the locals. It's a developing country. There's a lot of food insecurity. There's a lack of certain resources, and that definitely shows. So I am privileged to go there and become more healthy, but public health and the kind of structural resources and those components are definitely lacking. So that's something that I hope to be able to contribute to positively eventually. I'm in a unique position where I'm in a very kind of remote, rural, essentially a fishing village. So there's no grocery stores, there's small pulperias, local farms, but the majority of locals live off a very carb-based diet. And something that I found interesting was, did you watch the Blue Zone documentary?
I know I purposely did not. I'm easily triggered.
You're like sweet potato, yams. I think that was like one of the big takeaways. Everyone should be eating yams. Um, I mean, but like anything in health, you can't just take one piece of data. There's so many variables to that. And what my biggest takeaway actually was that I think a lot of it is community above all else is the most common denominator there beyond any of the specific foods. But one of the countries they highlight, or one of the areas they highlight, is in Costa Rica. And where I'm living in Nicaragua is not that far from this blue zone in Costa Rica. So even just in a very small, spatial difference, you can see an obvious health disparity, in that gap. So I would say, most people are struggling with their health there. There's a lack of dental care for a lot of the locals, as one example, and a really high rate of diabetes, as you can imagine. And you can see the food landscape shifting where now, even though it's a remote area, you see, small children walking around with 2 liters of pop because some of the families don't have clean water access and they have access to soda for pennies.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, that's so sad. It must be hard. Like you just want to like go and like save everybody too. I see that you're saving the dogs there. You're starting with that.
I was
How,
just gonna say, yeah, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. Well, and there is this kind of assumption that, I mean, they call us all gringos, and said with love, but that anyone visiting is wealthy, and comparatively, sure, but there's also wealthy locals. I think the disparity is just a bit larger, but yeah, it can be really difficult, and so that's why it's important to me to make change and have an impact. Already I was able to link in with a local women's wellness group. I had the founder of that group on my podcast, and I just think it's really important that if you're an expat coming into this local culture, that you're doing something to contribute. And something that has become important to me recently is, I think that everybody who's going to move to, because it's becoming trendy, I wouldn't say it's something that I kind of was seeking out. It happened, and I'm so grateful that it did. And what an amazing opportunity. But um, I am dating someone who has spent their whole life living in Nicaragua. And so as a result of that, I've been able to have the opportunity to live life as a local, and I say that kind of in air quotes because, it's not, it's playing house when you get to just do it for a few weeks and then, go back to your air conditioned Airbnb. That's not the case. And so I really think that if someone has the opportunity to visit these places, it would go a very far way to have an experience kind of living as a local or with locals and being in a local community, so that you can really understand that disparity, because it will allow you to show up in the world and be grateful and be more mindful of those communities in a much bigger way.
That's awesome. So if nothing changed, your diet's the same, your work, all that. So why did your body calm down there? Do you think it's like the environment and being by the ocean? Like what's that about, you think?
So I've done some research trying to figure it out because the heart rate thing was so crazy to me. I'm like, how can my heart rate go so low? Which is hilarious because I mean, you have sometimes I go to your TikTok and read the comments and I'm like mad for you. Like, I want to chime in. So, you know how it is where everybody has an opinion. I post that my heart rate was 38 and, everyone and their dog was like, you better go to the doctor. And I'm like, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for your concern. I'm fine. But I looked, I'm like, do people's heart rates generally lower in a warmer climate? No, most people's heart rates increase. Your body's working harder to cool you down. I think that there's something to be said about the proximity to the equator, but I think the reason that actually is having an impact is because of the circadian rhythm. And I think there's something about grounding, being in, I'm always in the ocean, I'm always in the sand, you're getting magnesium in the ocean. Like, I think it's a variety of factors. And I mean, living my whole life in Canada, particularly in the prairies where we have 6 months of winter, and that's no exaggeration, I wonder if my baseline just always would be this way in a tropical climate. So I think that circadian rhythm is the biggest part because the sun rises at 5:30, it sets at 5:30, and I massively struggle with sleep in Canada. I've struggled with insomnia the majority of my life. I've never done anything for it. I just, try my best to have, good sleep hygiene and be mindful of it, but it's an ongoing issue and it never is an issue in Nicaragua. And I think it's just because of, I live with the natural cycle of the world a little bit more, which is difficult in North America. Another just really personal to me component is that I stopped training jujitsu while I was there. And in Canada, I train jujitsu at like 6:30 to 8 p.m. And so then I'm wired. And you're also forcing yourself to do the most activity at the part of the day where your melatonin should be taking over and you're kind of unnaturally combating that. So I think that may be, an added personal benefit. And then I changed the way that I was training, have no access to any form of gym there. So I've been doing all body weight training and, so yoga, walking on the beach, swimming, surfing, running in the sand, Pilates, high intensity body weight workouts, but nothing with weights and just maybe stressing my body in a different way where I can recover a bit more quickly. So those are my theories. I would love to publish something and actually figure out the science behind this at some point because what is his name? Dr. Anthony Gustin. Do you remember? He's the founder of Perfect Keto. Is that his name?
That sounds familiar.
He sold it now, I believe, but I think his name's Anthony Gustin. And I saw him happen to post something around the same time that I was in Nicaragua and saying that he had just spent, I think it was like 6 weeks or something in Costa Rica, and that he hadn't changed like any of his kind of normal variables aside from being outside all day. And that's another big component, like just in the sun more. And he noticed similar trends in his biomarkers. So I think there's something to being in the tropical climates.
Yeah, that makes sense that, maybe being in Canada, it's just different lifestyle, a little bit maybe more stressful for your body and yeah, not, living naturally with the circadian rhythms. And I was going to ask if you do any like biohacking stuff, but it almost seems like it just comes like naturally. Like you're outside, you're surfing, you're in the sand. So do you do anything intentional or is that just how your day naturally goes?
It's so funny that you say that because I've started developing like all of these kind of loose theories where I'm like, okay, so biohacking, we're just trying to undo that abnormal lifestyle that we've created for ourselves. I'll say like specifically in North America, but I mean, no, we see it, I mean, in Asia, and this is an issue in many places. And again, I always try to speak from like a place of recognizing my privilege. Obviously, I work remotely. I have the flexibility and freedom to do this in many ways. But I think that biohacking, we're really just trying to counteract all of these natural cycles that we're no longer following. So I don't do anything specific. At the one thing that I would have done in Canada, like I do cold plunges and cold showers, and it's impossible to get cold water in Nicaragua. So that's not something I'm doing. That's something I would like to have access to. But in terms of any other intentional biohacking, really nothing.
Yeah, and that's such a good point that we're doing these biohacking things to counteract things in our life that we weren't really designed to do, staring at screens all day and being inside and watching TV and not having that sense of community. So it almost seems like do we all just like need to move to move to Costa Rica and Nicaragua to live our best lives?
Well, and that's where, I mean, you homeschool your kids, and I'm seeing just this really big shift, not only in terms of, independent lifestyle, and maybe that does mean moving to a different climate. Obviously, we're going to have an issue if everybody from every state and province in North America tries to move to a warmer climate. But I think that part of it is just recognizing this lifestyle where it seems like there's a shift happening where we're like, okay, whoa, 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 maybe this isn't working. Let's maybe take it back a step to how it was, certain things were done. I don't want to sound like I'm not progressive, but, like a couple of generations ago. I am from a small kind of farming town in Saskatchewan, Canada. And so I think about seeing the shift almost back to like how my grandparents would have done things in terms of eating seasonally and kind of like rising and setting with the sun. But I mean, I think that a lot of people are making that choice to kind of choose a simpler life because that's the life which maybe allows you to live with some of these cycles. For me, just an like side that come from this is working more with my female menstrual cycle too, because now I'm like listening to all these things that my body is telling me. And when I'm not go, 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 forcing myself to be working and on screens till, midnight, which I've had many seasons of life. And, I don't regret those seasons because I think they've allowed me now to have some of the flexibility that I have today. But you don't recognize those signs. You're just like on a carb-based diet, most people don't realize how crappy they feel on a carb-based diet because it's just their baseline until they try something else. So I think a lot of people are planting seeds for some of these kind of lifestyle shifts right now.
Yeah, and if someone can't make a move, it's almost like, let's learn from them, like, what's going on there, and it seems to me, it's like maybe living with a little less stress because you're outside, you're being in the sunshine, you're not inside, so that makes me wonder, like, do you do anything intentional oh, intentional, why did that sound weird? To help manage your stress, do you do any like meditation or journaling, or is just living down there enough?
Yes, I anchor on certain habits when I really need them. So recently in Nicaragua, I was meditating, doing yoga, but my stress is generally just less. And I don't think that is because it's not present. It's just different. I'm running a business, I'm doing a master's degree, recently invested in Airbnb, so there's kind of a lot of moving parts, but I think it just affects me less. I'm able to manage it more well. But with this transition, I went from Nicaragua back to Canada for a week and then back and then to Barbados. I really thrive off of structure. So in Nicaragua, my life is a little more flowy, but I really do thrive off structure. And so when I'm going through big life transitions, I really anchor into habits. So right now, I'm being very consistent with meditation in the morning, a good stretch, always a walk. And those things really help me bring my stress levels down. And then a lot of time in silence with myself. So yesterday I had a bunch of meetings. It was go, 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 recorded a podcast. And I'm like, I need an hour walking in nature with nobody talking to me. I love talking. I'll talk all day, obviously. But I know when I need that time to just kind of bring myself down. And then journaling before bed has been a really good inclusion for me as well, because sometimes I do fall off those habits when I get too busy. I think it impacts me less when I'm in Nicaragua, but it's, a good anchor for me to have.
Love that. Okay, I'm kicking myself because I have this list of things and I got so excited about like where you're at and where you're living that I skipped over my very first question I wanted to ask you because I wanted to ask you what you ask everybody else. In the very beginning of your podcast, you welcome your
Oh,
guests and you say, "How do you keep yourself well?"
I love that. How the tables have turned. That's so funny. Do you want to know? I've never actually put thought into how I personally would answer this question. I mean, I think for me, it has evolved a million times over and is forever evolving. I think I really try to think of, kind of mental, physical, spiritual. Not that those are all independent. I think they really do integrate and impact one another. But, you know, uh, mentally, sleep is number one. I am such a lesser version of myself when I am not sleeping. And that's something I really honor because I would love to just grind, but I just can't. Emotionally, I'm not at my best when I do that. And then my output is less as well. So I always, say to my clients who like, can't get enough sleep, the hours that you're then awake are less productive. Like that time, that extra hour is better spent sleeping. So sleep, mindful meditation. I am really lean into mindful meditation and journaling. And then physically, I have to move every day. Like if I could move all day, I would be moving outside all day. I love moving my body. So always doing some form of movement every day. And keto nutrition is huge throughout all of these areas for me because how I found keto was for my mental and cognitive health, specifically my cognitive health. And so I am not operating at my max if I'm not in a state of ketosis. That doesn't mean I don't go out of ketosis from time to time, but very rarely, if ever, because it's just my set point. And for sure, community and relationships. And I found it funny before I think we were recording, you mentioned the word nomad, which is really not something I have thought about until you use that word. I guess I have been living in suitcase since September, but community is something that's really important for me. And I have my community back home that I stay in contact with virtually, and I really try to make sure I'm honoring those connections. Then really quickly try to find communities in person everywhere I go. So here in Barbados, the first thing that I did was find a jiu-jitsu gym. It's like a built-in community. They welcome you with open arms. So those are just a few of the primary methods for me.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, so speaking of like keto and stuff, I feel like this is kind of taking the talk like a 180, but what are your thoughts on Ozempic? Because I feel like that's such a hot topic right now in the weight loss and wellness community, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it as a keto coach.
So this is interesting because I saw this coming maybe. I think it's been really popular the last year, and I saw this coming about 2 years ago when almost I don't want to be hyperbolic. A strong majority of my clients would come back from a doctor's appointment and tell me that their doctor recommended Ozempic or whatever variation of. And so I saw this uptick and I'm like, oh no, what's gonna happen? um, I want to be really just gentle that I understand why people would take Ozempic, and I understand that there's a time and place where having so much excess weight is worse for the body potentially than the effects of a weight loss medication. But I would say the general rapidness of the prescription is something that really makes me uneasy. We're just now seeing more and more because it has been prescribed for a long time, but not as a weight loss medication in this way. So, everyone's like GLP-1 inhibitors aren't new. Accurate, but they are pretty new in terms of just being prescribed to the average person as a weight loss medication. And so we don't have a ton of longitudinal research on the effects of that. We're just now seeing things like, the digestive issues, the paralyzed gut, like some of these long-term issues. The biggest issue that I have in terms of the side effects, obviously having paralyzed digestion would be horrific, but the up to 50% degradation of bone and muscle mass. And the reason this is particularly scary in my mind is because not that it's not dangerous that young people would be having that effect. It's, not a great option for anyone, but this is being recommended to older people as well. And as we age, one of the biggest reasons for like long-term debilitation outside of chronic disease is falls. And those falls happen because of lack of muscle and then lack of bone density leads to breaks. So, in my brain, like one of my kind of taglines I always say is we're working for your physical retirement fund. So I'm 33, but I'm thinking about when I'm 93, and I'm thinking about that for all of my clients all across the board. Yes, we want to feel good right now acutely. That's awesome. But we also want to make sure that that feeling and your quality of life can be extended. So I'm really mindful about what that potentiality has for people. Also, the financial cost. We've already seen this happen. There's a shortage. We can't get it. So that's one issue. And then the financial cost of people paying out of pocket. It's not sustainable what happens when it goes away, or you can't afford it anymore, you choose to go off of it. It's just like if you go off of keto or carnivore, it's one of the things that still is almost ironic to me that people will be like, oh, I felt so great on keto, but it doesn't work because when I went off of it, I gained all the weight back. Well, shocking, like the thing that was working for you worked because you were doing it and then you stopped doing it. So, when you go back on to your normal diet and you're no longer taking Ozempic, if habit change has not happened, it's not going to be sustainable. So I just think always in health, we should be leading with lifestyle recommendations, or at least having lifestyle recommendations, alongside prescriptions. And I'm sure there are physicians doing that, but generally, I would say I think we're going to see the floor fall out, unfortunately, from all of this. And I have lots of clients who have been prescribed it and they're like, I told my doctor, no, I'm going to do this with, lifestyle, and see me back in 6 months and kind of like, let me show you. And, I think that it should be motivation to stay off of it. And I think that's the thing. It's kind of potentially being handed out like candy, it's like kind of the carrot dangling in front of the horse, because a lot of people struggling with weight loss have been struggling for a long time. And as you can speak to, you bang your head up against the wall, you're trying things, it's not working, why isn't it working? And so I understand if that someone's in that position and someone says, hey, but here's a prescription for Ozempic, absolutely. And maybe that is even better for your mental health at some point. So I don't want to blanket statement and say like there can be no benefit from it, but I think it should be a last resort with the goal of still getting to the point of, changing as much as you can with lifestyle. Because if fat loss is not happening and you can't get yourself to a healthy weight, something is wrong. And we need to figure out what that root cause is. And to me, Ozempic is a band-aid. Yes, if you're insulin resistant, a GLP-1 inhibitor can work, but guess what? If you're insulin resistant, you need to reverse that insulin resistance through very like simple but not easy, I'll say simple but not easy lifestyle change.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Especially if someone's 500 pounds, like the health risk of you being 500 pounds is
Yeah,
probably going to be way
exactly.
worse than you taking this. And I get the people that maybe need to lose 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds. Like I get
Yeah,
the frustration of that being a struggle. So I get when someone has this, magic pill for you, you might want to
yeah.
take it to just be done, but it worries me besides the side effects. Like you said, like what's going to happen when you're at your goal weight? Are you still on this forever so you can maintain it, or do you go off of it? And have you done any of the inner work and like the mental work around food? Like if you're still eating your normal diet, but you're just eating less of it because it's suppressing your
Yeah.
appetite, what happens when you go off of it? So that would be my concern.
Yeah, and I've found that with some, because look, I'm here to support a client's choice. I have clients and friends, and so I try to be really careful when I talk about it, because I don't love, I'm not as strong skinned as you. Okay, I can't handle pissy people, but I don't want to hurt anyone's feeling, because I understand. I've lived in this world. This has been my whole life professionally, since I was 20 years old. I understand as much as I possibly can how incredibly difficult it is to be unhappy in your body. So I never want to make someone feel worse, especially someone I know and love. If they've chosen to be on Ozempic, I think it's just so important, to weigh the risks of it. And so when nutrition recommendations and like strength training recommendations to try to counter some of these potential side effects aren't being handed out, what I'm seeing is because of that change in appetite, people are also eating less protein. And so this is just exacerbating the problem even more, because if you're only able to eat a small amount and you don't have an appetite, I mean, your appetite is probably not for pure protein, right? It's, for something that is more appealing. So I think it's going to add just to those snowball effects. And I think of it in my mind very similar to how I think of weight loss surgery, not because those are the same. They're obviously very different methods to weight loss, but I've worked with clients through gastric bypass and various weight loss surgeries where they have done counseling before. They've had to lose weight before. They've had to prove months of following a diet that they are going to follow after the surgery to try to mediate the risk of, undoing the effects of that surgery. And so I think an approach like that would likely be more sustainable and make me feel better about people being recommended it, because it's just going to be less likely to have those effects. And I have seen physicians slow emphasis on slowly starting to recommend that. And I do think there's a difference too, like in Canada and in the US, just based on what I've observed even on social media with the recommendations. But again, I think the lifestyle component and kind of trying to undo unnatural things that we've introduced, why are we struggling as a society so much, and how do we fix that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, you look around and everybody's overweight and sick, and then you see what they're eating and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't even believe," and I feel like I talk about this all the time, but just the snacks that are handed out at like my kids' soccer games, it's like appalling. Like
Mhm.
there needs to be some changes. Like
Mhm.
and it's like, how do you go and save everybody?
Well, and as you see, like the backlash, I also understand why it's hard. I talk about keto all the time, and I've been keto based for so long. It feels like the most easy, normal thing in the world for me. But I'm very aware that in the grand scheme of things, we're still like the first adapters in this, even though it's been a decade. And, first readapters, I should say, because carnivore was the original way of eating. Keto was the original way of eating, right? Like it's only been in the last, let's say, few hundred years that we've been eating carbs every single day, and now we've got packaged foods and we've got processed foods, and oh, we're eating 3 meals and 3 snacks. Well, where did those recommendations, well, we know where they came from. Where did those recommend, let the conspiracies start flying, where those recommendations come from. And I see when you post what you feed your kids, which is exactly how I would strive to feed my kids, the backlash, like the comments that I see from people feeding their children a whole foods diet, being like, CPS should see this. Do you know how many kids in the world have no food on their table? Your kid's got a ribeye steak. Come on.
Exactly. And I've actually had CPS workers reach out and be like, "You are totally fine," like reassuring me. They're like, "When we go, we literally just need to make sure there's food in the house, and it's appalling the food that's even in the house. Like it can be crap food as long as there's food." So, yeah, I'm always shocked by the comments on that too.
And and I think I try to come with all of this always from compassion. I get heated about it just because I'm so passionate, but I want it to all come with compassion, because I understand, like, I'm living now in a place where poverty is high. And I recently did a nutrition seminar for some of the local women in Nicaragua. And I made general nutrition plans just to give ideas of what to eat based on all of the local foods that they have available, keeping the budget in mind of $1 a day. Tell a woman to eat a 1 gram of protein per every pound of body weight on $1 a day. I mean, so it's so easy to like throw out these blanket statements, but I'm like, at the end of the day, the takeaway that I gave on that talk was like, eat whole food. The best thing you can do, at least eat whole food. If you're going to eat beans and rice, like, yeah, of course, if I can preach keto, great. But the reality of trying to implement a keto diet for someone who is living a local life in Nicaragua is very difficult. Not only is it not part of their cultural foods, it's tortillas, it's beans and rice, it's plantains, but because that's what's cheap, that's what's affordable, but that's what's there. So I'm like, okay, then let's compromise. Try to at least add a protein to the beans and rice that you're eating, right? Like we don't have to ruin good for perfect when we don't have the ability to control everything. Because I think that's, a lot of the carnivore feedback I see. Well, yeah, it's easy to say, like, if you can afford ribeye every day, but I can't. Well, can you afford eggs? Can you afford sardines? Can you, or do your, just do the best. Like we're all at the end of the day just trying to do our best and finding what works. But when people say fast food is cheaper, I'm like, Okay, I went to McDonald's once in like the last probably decade because my brother and wife had a baby. I was on the way to the hospital. They asked me to pick up my brother's keto as well. A bunless quarter pounder, chicken nuggets. I won't say who those were for, not for me. And I got two drinks, and it was like 25 Canadian dollars. I could get two rotisserie chickens for that and feed myself for 2 weeks. So fast food is not cheaper, and we need to decipher between, ease, convenience, and affordability because they're definitely not always one and the same.
Exactly. And back to you teaching like the nutrition at Nicaragua, I think it's definitely about even just making small changes and baby steps when you can. And yeah, slowly incorporating protein if you can, but that's wild that their budgets are $1 a day. Just curious, like what is the cost of like, say, a pound of ground beef? And do you know what that would be like in American dollars?
Oh, good question. Okay, let me try and think about
Or what
this.
is it in Canadian?
So I think, okay, I'm trying to think of the average. I think, don't quote me on this. I think that the average family has $10 a day for food, but so I think it actually does end up being close to $1 a day. So there are ways that you can get cheaper protein, like if you're, working with talk to a local butcher. Something to be mindful of is that there's also often not refrigeration for local families. So they're not like, but you can fish, you can get eggs. So most families will have their own chickens. I don't know what a price for ground beef would be because I sometimes shop at the gringo grocery store. And there, though, like that's one thing to keep in mind. People are like, oh, Costa Rica's cheaper, Nicaragua's cheaper. It really depends on how you live. If you live like a local, it can be cheaper. If you live like an American or a Canadian, it, with wanting all of the same products, you can spend just as much, if not more, because they're trying, they're getting all these products in. But I think that I paid $3 for a pound of beef,
Okay.
I want to say USD, because you can pay USD there. I put it on Instagram. I'll have to double check. I had done a price comparison, but I mean, probably 50% cheaper if you're getting it from local.
Okay. Interesting.
You can get a
Um,
pound of cheese for $3,
okay.
fresh homemade cheese,
Ooh,
and a
yummy.
liter of raw milk for 50 cents.
No
Straight,
way.
literally warm from the warm from the cow. You have to. So in my little village, it's like my favorite activity. You get up first thing when they're milking the cow. You take whatever container that you want the milk in. And they will literally milk the cow in front of you, pour the milk into your container, and it's yeah, less than $1.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to schedule a class trip down there. Don't you have an Airbnb that you recently bought that you're renting out?
Yes, I mean it only fits two people, but I am working like I'm this is not a sales tactic because I have nothing organized yet, but I would like to do a retreat there and do some of this like let's make yogurt, let's see where our food is coming from, let's see like some of the actual living in the culture because a lot of people that visit our area don't see that it's quite famous for surf resorts, but if you're only in the resort, you're not really fully experiencing the local life. But yes, I would love to have. I mean, you should do a field trip with your kids. It's a school trip. We'll go milk the cows, make fresh cheese and yogurt. But it's really motivating to me to be self-sustained because you can get land super cheap there. I know we've talked about this. How much
Yes.
is land? I need to just become a realtor because I'm like trying to get all my friends doing that, like living the lifestyle that we live. Like, hey, come hang out. Let's start a commune in uh, Nicaragua. But you can get really cheap land and you can grow a lot of things, year round there because the climate's so great. So if you've got the resources to, get a little bit of land and get planting and maybe get some chickens, you could live pretty affordably.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know when we were talking about the prices, I'm like, "Ooh, that's not bad. I think I could do that now to only get my husband on board." Okay, so to wrap things up, I'm just curious, like, what goals do you have for yourself as far as improving your health or even just like in your personal life? Like, what are you working on and striving for?
So, okay, improving my health. Well, this is I'm like a overshare. Like my hormonal health is really important to me right now. You may know, I was a professional bodybuilder in my early 20s, and I was really hard on my body for a really long time. And so my overall physical health and hormonal health is something that I look at from a totally different lens now, where I am so gentle with myself. I'm working with myself. I'm not trying to force my body into being leaner and, going farther and faster all the time. I'm really working with my body in a much different, gentler way. I'm 33 and I've been very focused on things like bodybuilding and career, but I would like the opportunity or, choice to have a family. So hormonal health and hormonal regulation is important to me. And then obviously the shift to like being based in Nicaragua has been a big 180, and it's just allowed me to look at what I'm actually striving for and why in a little bit of a different way. And I think that it's really natural to go to a place like that and have your goals shift a little bit. And so my purpose and passions are the same, but the goals have shifted a little bit. So I'll finish my master's degree and hopefully graduate spring of 2025. We're going to be publishing this research on type 2 diabetes, which is something I would like to continue doing, research and publication and trying to get involved in public health more, no matter where I am. I think it's really important to acknowledge where I came from, and I would like to be able to do good work in Canada, as well as potentially support some of the other communities that I've now been introduced to. And growing my business along the way. I'm really passionate about one-on-one coaching. I know a lot of people are kind of leaning out of one-on-one coaching and doing, all online courses and, all Kajabi, like you
Hmm.
just don't have that same one-on-one. And I understand why people maybe stray away from that because, I'm my own bottleneck. There's only one of me, and I don't want to teach someone to do what I am doing. It's hard to do that when I've just got 10 years of experience, but I'm working on opening up other avenues to support more people. And I've been working on a really in-depth webinar for a long time where literally the first half is like the history of how we ate as humans, like whole timeline of when we started implementing plants and started eating, carbs and got away from keto, as well as a whole history of debunking when and why and how fat started getting such a bad rap. So like the whole first half of it is basically history to understand why our beliefs are the way we are, because I think until we can debunk that for people, we can't get them to really buy in on keto because there's still fear of a carnivore, like the cholesterol is going to kill you. So that, and then now I'm building out all of the actual keto specific education. And that's something I hope to be offering in the near future. And yeah, trying to convince all my friends to come visit me in Nicaragua so I don't have to go back to Canada for winter.
Love that. So amazing. Okay, before I ask you three rapid fire questions, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and what your offers are and how they can work with you?
My Instagram is where I'm most active. I've tried to embrace the TikTok train like you, but I just don't think I have anything to say. So KY Wellness Co is my Instagram. My website is kywellness.ca, and then my podcast is Keep Yourself Well. And you can shoot me a message anytime. If you email me or message me through my website, I will never miss anything. I'm always amazed that you are able to respond to Instagram messages because I feel like that is just it's hard to keep up with. So those are the best avenues. I always appreciate an email or a website message because I love to help and give recommendations, and I just never want anything to be missed.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so I am going to end with how you end your podcast. So, who would be one of your biggest role models?
Dang, this one's so hard because that's the one I'm always like, I don't have. You know what? I will say my mom and both my parents. I will say my parents together. For different reasons. My dad went back to university when I was like 10 years old, maybe, to study psychology, and that is such a big commitment for both him. Sorry, rapid fire. Anyway, so and inspired me to study psychology. And he is someone who just he taught me a lot of discipline. And that is something that I think has served me so well through the rest of my life. And we're just very similar. And my mom was a geriatric nurse her whole life, and she just worked for everyone her whole life, worked evenings and nights, and somehow always was having food on the table. They never missed an event, and I strive to be as good as they are.
Oh, that gave me chills. I love that. What an
Oh,
awesome mom. Okay,
yeah.
what is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh. Okay, it's not necessarily advice, but it's a quote.
That's
And
fine.
I, not to bring this back to my dad, but my dad wrote this in a card for me when I was in high school, and I just regret being such a little punk because I didn't keep the card. And I think about this always. And I thought he must have gotten it from a poem or something, so I just thought it was so eloquent. I think he made it up because I've researched it, can't find it. But it's, may your darkest days be only brief intervals between the bright days of the rest of your life. And it's like a fancy version of this too shall pass. Like, just it can't keep getting worse, right? Like, it can't always get worse. And so I just love that is something that it just comes back to me often when I need it. And like, you can do hard things. If you're, I don't know if you remember, I was crying my eyes out the first week I was in Nicaragua, being like, I'm so uncomfortable. This is so hard. I'm like, oh, it's just a little adaptation.
I love that quote. Okay, our last one. What is a best book or resource that you could recommend for someone?
Oh, I recommend this to everyone. And I feel like at this point, it's not that unique, but Atomic Habits. Um, I used to read Atomic Habits every year, and I recommend it to all of my clients. I think that it helps understand the psychology a little bit more of, why creating habits is hard. And, to come back to kind of the theme of that, what we've talked about, like, all of this is not easy in the environments that we're living in, and at the pace that we're living in. And so I think that book by James Clear is just a really actionable way that gives you tools you can start implementing now. Because I think sometimes with self-help books, we can get lost in the weeds, and it's not short and sweet and actionable. And I think that the way that he structures that book is very helpful. But I'm sure in the very near future, I can say Courtney Luna's Carnivore Cookbook.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Like, so amazing. I appreciate you taking the time from your, I was going to say busy lifestyle, but your chill, relaxed, stress-free free life.
Well, I mean, we're supposed to be doing research in Barbados right now. So although it's an island, we are here for work. But I appreciate it. And I can't wait to have you back on my end to talk about the cookbook and the sardine diet.
I would love to talk about that. It's going swimmingly well, if you will. It's amazing.
Yeah. So
So,
thank you so much. And thanks for having me, and congratulations on all of
thank
your success.
you. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.